Minuteman Tickets. They are locally owned in Columbus. We're just really excited to have a sponsor, to be honest with you. You've heard lots of other companies talk about tickets and how to buy them and their cool apps and websites and all these different things. And the Minuteman Tickets website is awesome. You should check it out, minutemantickets.com. You can check out the tickets you want to buy. But here's a little secret. If you want to save yourself some fees, call them directly. Call 614-943-3000. 614-943-3000. All this will be in the show notes. So if you're going to check out that Smashing Pumpkins reunion tour or whatever it is you're going to do this summer, Minuteman Tickets.
Waiting for next year. Waiting for next year.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 3 Sports Podcast. I am Ben Axelrod. Joining me, as always, is Waiting for Next Year's Craig Lyndall. It's been a minute since we've done one of these. We had some. I was out at spring training. You had some life obligations. We haven't talked, I think, in 2 or 3 weeks at this point. But
we were just waiting for the Browns to make moves.
Yeah, and lo and behold, they have nearly. How have you processed everything that's happened in the last week? Because we're coming up now. By the time most of you are hearing this, it will have been just about a week since all the trades in which they acquired Jarvis Landry and Tyrod Taylor and Demarius Randall and the free agent signings of TJ Carey and Carlos Hyde and Darren Fells and all those guys. How have you sort of processed this last week in Cleveland Browns football, not to mention Joe Thomas's retirement? Should we save that for the end?
Yeah, we'll definitely save that for the end. And so do you mean how have I processed it beyond the Sashi Wars? Or no, I'm joking. No, I expected a lot of this. It's actually been even more than I would have guessed.
Yeah.
There have been, I think, other than the first couple of trades, there have not been a lot of super splashy moves. It's been very much about building the middle class of the roster, which I think the Browns needed to do. I guess I just didn't expect it to happen this widely and this fast.
Yeah.
It's been really intense.
It sort of makes sense, though, right? Because this is a team that's had an economy's worth of cap space. Not only that, the draft assets they have, this is something that I think gets lost in a lot of the conversations about, did they give up too much? Is Tyrod Taylor worth the number 65 pick in the draft? And to me, like, you can't judge the Browns holding the 65 pick when they have 5 other picks in front of it, the same as you would any other team holding that pick when it's either their 3rd round pick. Inconceivably, it could be this is the number 65 pick in the draft for the Browns would have been their 6th pick. Some teams don't have 6 picks in the draft. Some teams don't make their 6th pick until the 6th or 7th round. But that's to say this team had a lot of trade assets. It had a lot of cap space. And yet it's 0-16. It makes sense that they were going to they've made 10 moves as far as signings and trades. That's probably what I would have set the over-under at.
Yeah.
To this point.
I'm surprised. I'm not surprised by the number total yet. I'm surprised that we're not talking about 10 days from now.
Right.
It's still so early in the process, and usually you kind of wait for that first wave. Mm-hmm. This free agency period also feels a little bit weird, a little bit strange, because I'm used to kind of the smart money waiting, and it feels a little bit like the NBA a couple of years back when everybody went bonkers,
right.
and now everybody's woken up with a hangover in the NBA.
Yeah.
I wonder if 2 years from now we're going to wake up with a hangover in the NFL, although the cap dynamics are different. So, but doesn't it feel a little like frenzied, like the NBA a couple of years back?
It feels like, like the quarterback market, and this is why I actually think the Tyrod Taylor move was. I'm a big fan, if you can't tell yet, of the Tyrod Taylor.
Well, we
trade.
should go deal by deal on the trades.
Okay. Yeah. So let's go. But I agree with you just in terms. Let's talk quarterbacks then, because we can talk wide receivers too with Jarvis Landry. I really liked the Tyrod Taylor trade. I think when you have that many draft picks, you can afford to overpay And most people are saying this was an overpay by the Browns, that they know Tyrod Taylor is only going to be on their roster for 1 year. The number 65 pick is far too valuable to give up for a 1-year rental at quarterback. Where I disagree there is that's assuming all bridge quarterbacks, right? That's the term now, bridge quarterback. Tyrod Taylor is a bridge quarterback to probably Sam Darnold. That's assuming that all bridge quarterbacks are the same. And I don't think having Tyrod Taylor this season and having A.J. McCarron this season are even remotely the same, because one, this is a team desperate to win games. So the quality of the quarterback, whoever they got, that mattered. It matters that Tyrod Taylor gives you a better chance at winning games in September and October and November than it did A.J. McCarron. Two, it matters in the sense that they very clearly, whoever they draft, whether it's Josh Allen or Sam Darnold or Josh Rosen or Baker Mayfield, they do not want that guy to play this year. And if A.J. McCarron comes in and stinks it up, if Sam Bradford comes in and gets injured, then you have to play that guy. And I don't think, I think they'll probably add another quarterback. I don't think either Cody Kessler or Kevin Hogan are going to be on this roster. I think they'll add another guy. I think it'll be interesting to see whether that guy's, I think it might be like a Matt Castle type, where that guy could conceivably be your second string quarterback, where if something were to happen to Tyrod Taylor, I just think if Tyrod Taylor was the guy who they coveted above all the rest, and they didn't want to make that commitment to Kirk Cousins, which clearly they didn't, then go out and overspend because you have the assets and can afford to do so.
Well, and this is the thing. Not all bridge, as you said, not all bridge quarterbacks are created equally. And if we're eliminating Kirk Cousins, we're eliminating Drew Brees, which I think we are for this conversation,
right,
because obviously that's not the market they're playing in. But if you're comparing Tyrod Taylor to A.J. McCarron and any other bridge quarterback not named Nick Foles, you could make the argument that the Browns just got the best one.
Right.
We're comparing him to Josh McCown and Nick Foles. If Nick Foles became available, he's now all of a sudden the best bridge quarterback.
Right.
But short of that, I mean, is Tyrod Taylor better than Teddy Bridgewater based on health?
I think
you could make the argument.
Yeah, I think
so. Is he better than Case Keenum? There's an argument to be had.
I think he is.
But I think it's a reasonable argument to say that the Browns got the best bridge quarterback. They have the best pick to draft the first overall quarterback. And so I'm with you. And that's the other thing. We don't want to go back to the A.J. McCarron trade, but in the middle of a season, when you have 1 million picks and you have 0 quarterbacks on your roster,
right,
that changes the market. I made the argument that but A.J. McCarron was worth a 2 and a 3 is the butthurt emails of Cleveland Browns Twitter. Yeah, it eliminates all context.
Right. It especially because that was a point in time in the season where they were so desperate for a win. I know for a fact that Hugh Jackson thought he could win some games down the stretch with A.J. McCarron, and the irony of that is maybe that saves Sashi Brown's job if they do win games. And yeah, I agree. It's just funny because the Sashi wars, you can't talk about this offseason, it seems like, without Sashi Brown being the funniest thing is I can't tell anymore when people refer to Sashi Brown in a religious vein or compare him to Batman in The Dark Knight. I can't tell who's being serious and who's joking anymore.
No, although it was when the Pro Football Talk post came out going, hey, just remember, you got to give credit to Sashi. I was like, okay.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Here's your credit. Here's your credit. I'd rather still have John Dorsey making these moves.
So the Tyrod Taylor trade, we're both giving that one a thumbs up.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the Jarvis Landry one.
Yeah. I like one that was. It seemed like they underpaid for Jarvis Landry, especially if they wind up signing him to an extension. I think I know I actually oddly know a lot about Jarvis Landry. And
is this a fantasy football take?
No, it's listens to the Dan Lebitard show, local hour. So I know a lot about the Miami Dolphins and Miami Marlins and Miami Heat. I probably know more about the Marlins than I do the Indians at this point. But Jarvis Landry, I mean, he's kind of been, when they franchised him, this was always probably a likely outcome because he's one of those guys who's too good lose for anything. I mean, he's a 3-time Pro Bowler. He's been a Pro Bowler for the last 3 seasons, but he's a guy who he's going to catch 9 balls for 83 yards. Like, he's just not a big playmaker. He'll catch some touchdowns. I think he had 9 touchdowns last year, but he is the quite essential possession receiver, which is actually interesting if you believe in Josh Gordon, which of course is a massive if. This is a perfect guy to pair with him on the field. And that was actually something they were saying on the Dan Le Batard show, was the Browns are going to use Jarvis Landry better than the Dolphins did, because Jarvis Landry shouldn't be racking up those numbers, but he's good enough that he can alleviate some of that pressure off of your offense. And the other thing, though, that's interesting about it is you were talking about how crazy this market has gotten. It's gotten particularly crazy when you look at the wide receivers, and Jarvis Landry is due for an extension here, or else he's going to be a free agent a year from now. And he, based on numbers, he's probably going to get the biggest wide receiver contract out there, whether it's this offseason or next.
Until Odell Beckham Jr., but yes, you're right.
Well, if Odell Beckham can stay off of out of the tabloids and out of page 6.
Yeah, no, that's true as well. I love the. It's not guaranteed to be a success, but I love the trade. It's really good for the Browns. This is an acquisition for them that is not like Kenny Britt. I don't know a lot about Jarvis Landry, but I do know that this guy is legit. His production is legit, and that he can actually contribute to this football team. No, not in the number one over the top, take the top off the defense, I'm going to catch a bunch of bombs kind of a way, but he absolutely has utility to an offensive coordinator who is willing to use him, and certainly in a bridge year with a bridge quarterback who has a tendency not to want to take risks over the top with the turnover like Tyrod Taylor does, he's going to catch a lot of checkdowns in space.
Yeah, it could be an incredible fit.
His biggest year ever.
It could be an incredible fit, him playing with Tyrod, because that's the knock on Tyrod, right? Is he doesn't take a lot of chances. He's really good downfield. Like, he has a good deep ball. He just doesn't do it a whole lot. But if he has that, for a quarterback who might be too conservative, Jarvis Landry is kind of the ultimate safety blanket.
They're going to be best friends.
And but my fear is they might become best friends, racking up numbers when they're throwing for 7 yards on 3rd and 9.
Yeah, very fair.
That's the potential downside of it.
Sure.
So it's he's not going to be that guy. My fear is that because of the Pro Bowls, because of the contract he might get even this offseason, I'm still not really getting a read on whether they want to sign him this offseason or...
No, it's really confusing.
Yeah, because it seemed like when they made the trade, it was okay and a contract's going to follow. And then now, because there hasn't been one, there hasn't been really any word, it seems like maybe they might just let the season play out. Maybe they franchise him again if they still have as much cap space as they usually have. But yeah, that's my fear, though, is maybe fans are getting their hopes up a little too high for him. But he's definitely a player. Because I see these like numbers where it's like he and Antonio Brown are the only receivers to catch 100 balls in each of the.
He's not Antonio Brown.
It's true, but it's also not a great context.
That's where you have to look past stats.
Right.
You have to have some context on the player and where he was playing. He is never going to be Antonio Brown.
No.
And that's okay.
Yeah, no one is.
That's fine.
Very few are. Corey Coleman's not going to be Antonio Brown.
And
despite
Josh Gordon's
what we
not going to be
said on
Antonio.
Yeah.
Josh Gordon's not either.
But if Josh Gordon can stay on the field,
yes,
and then whether it's signing another guy like Terrell Pryor, who's still out there, although we were talking off air about how it's kind of strange if that was going to happen. It seems like it would have happened already. And then Corey Coleman, maybe. I mean, I know there are rumblings that he's not long for this roster or this locker room, but I think Corey or Josh Gordon and Jarvis Landry, that's a significant upgrade from some of those receiver lineups they were trotting out there last season.
Corey Coleman still has talent, and I hope that everything that it feels like
he has upside.
Yes, but
he hasn't shown a lot in terms. Maybe that's parsing words, but
everything that we're hearing seems to indicate that it's less about the pure God-given ability and more about, fit and maybe, locker room type stuff and everything else. But I think there's a chance that if given the right opportunity and the right guidance, that Corey Coleman can still be a really solid number 2. I know a lot of people don't. I think maybe you even said this, but I've talked to a number of people who want Corey Coleman to come in as the 4th wide receiver and have to earn his way back up the depth chart.
It's not even to me about earning it. It's just from a roster standpoint, I wouldn't feel comfortable with his role.
But let's just say I feel more comfortable than I did with Hollywood Higgins and Ricardo Lewis.
Yeah, I think my fear.
If you consider the receiving core the Browns tried to start the season with, and the quarterback room that they tried to come into last season with, it's pretty.
Well, when Corey Coleman was out and before Josh Gordon got back, it was essentially Kenny Britt, Ricardo Lewis, and Hollywood Higgins. I don't think I'm missing anybody.
Well, the dudes that they picked up, so
the Coates and
Sammy Coates,
and Casey Williams didn't play much.
Right.
So,
but they were there.
That was the. Right. So those were the backups.
They were humans on the roster.
It looks like the Browns actually. I just saw this. They just traded Jason McCourty to the Patriots for a 6th and 7th round swap.
Oh, okay. I thought they had cut McCourty.
Yeah, they had. I don't know. Whatever. All right. Well, good for. Why would they be swapping picks on that?
After missing out on Jimmy Garoppolo, the Patriots and the Browns are besties now.
Did they just take lower? Maybe it's a cap thing. I don't know. Where if they trade him instead of That's kind of whatever. That's kind of irrelevant.
How weird is that though? Because that leads us. I know it wasn't the next trade in order, but so now the Browns have made 2 trades.
Wait. I want to get back to Corey Coleman real quick.
Corey Coleman.
My fear with him, and I know I bag on him on Twitter a lot.
You do.
Yeah. But
has he blocked you yet?
Oh, I don't know. He doesn't strike me as a search his own name kind of guy.
Yeah, he's above it. He doesn't care.
My fear is he'll go down, and this is why I probably bag on him so much, is I think he's kind of the poster child for the last 2 seasons, where it was about valuing these web charts and these graphs from draft combine numbers over actual on-field production and talent and play, although he's actually a very productive player.
But he's also the latest in a long line. He is
right.
Phil Taylor to Julio Jones.
Sure.
He is himself to Carson Wentz.
But to an extreme, not even because he didn't wind up working out, but because I thought he was a talented player.
Yes.
And that talent may never be realized in Cleveland because when they tore down that roster, the roster was devoid of adults.
Right. And
it seems like Corey Coleman has not been a model citizen off the field. And maybe that doesn't change regardless of who's in the locker room. But it seems like, look, that wide receiver group last year between Kenny Britt and Sammy Coates and those guys, like that was not a good group in that locker room. And it didn't do Corey Coleman any favors.
No.
And that's my fear, is just not only because you could have had Carson Wentz or Joey Bosa or conceivably Jared Goff rather than Corey Coleman, but also what Corey Coleman could have been was never realized or may never be realized. And I think a big part of that was because of the approach Sashi Brown took to this roster.
Fair.
But that's why I bag on him, because it just represents to me the 2016-2017 Cleveland Browns. Continue. You were about to.
So then that brings us to the next trade. Mm-hmm. And let's go in order then.
Okay.
Let's go to the man who was trying to throw the ball to Corey Coleman.
Yes.
Traded to the Packers. DeShone Kizer traded to the Packers for
Demarius Randall. Thank you. Yes. You're going to have to help me with the Chiefs cornerback's name. That's the one that
I'll
keeps
never remember.
me.
We'll have to look it up. There are too many moves. We haven't had enough time. I need Cliff's notes. And I didn't bring any.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead on this one. I'm going to say that I don't know much about Demarius Williams other than I think I'm excited about
it's Randall.
Demarius Randall. Sorry. I'll do that 100 more times. But I don't understand why they traded DeShone Kizer. I don't necessarily think it was a wise move. I think there's a chance that DeShone Kizer could have a better overall career than Tyrod Taylor. I think that he was just thrust into it way too early. So unless there are some bad feelings that were irreparable, I don't understand this move.
I think you're right. DeShone Kizer, I think, could have a long and fruitful NFL career, even though I've said he strikes me as the kind of guy who is going to wind up in like 8 different quarterback competitions with like 12 different teams over the course of his, I guess it would be like 7 different teams over the course of his NFL career. He just seems like that guy who's always good. Like,
but he could also end up as Jake Delhomme.
He could, yeah.
That's kind of my point.
I just don't, whatever he winds up being, the best version of it was not going to happen in Cleveland after last year. I think it was so not only irreparable with Hugh Jackson, but look, you bring in Tyrod Taylor this year to be the starter. You bring in quarterback Sam Darnold, Josh Rosen, Josh Allen, Baker Mayfield. One of those, we know they're going to pick one of them at number 1.
Yes.
Like, where does DeShone Kizer fit in there? And then, so it's another wasted year.
I think he's second string in the first year.
Yeah, but that's second string with no chance of being higher than that in year 3.
I don't know that that's
I think
true.
Once you pick a guy, his career in Cleveland's over.
I think it could be. But even still, he's having a chance to... We make up many fake rules about quarterbacks and roster decisions in Cleveland. We make up fake rules because that's the way it happened with Romeo Crennel. It doesn't have to be clean. A good organization deals with messy scenarios and does what's best for itself. And the Browns fans constantly make apologies for front offices to just clean things up because, I don't know, it would feel weird to me. Like, stop it. It's the most valuable position. The Patriots had both Garoppolo and Jacoby Brissett behind Tom Brady, and it worked fine. Like, I'm sorry. It's the most valuable position in the sport, and you've got a second rounder who has 15 games experience, some of it miserable, but a few throws.
Most of it miserable.
Yeah, no, I know. But some of the throws within the games were good. Some of the plays.
I just don't think...
That's my rant, and I'm sticking to it.
I know, it was quite the rant.
Thank you.
It feels, though, like a thing where you're putting a Madden roster together rather than a real roster. Like, I just don't see how... They were so bad to DeShone. DeShone Kizer had no business starting last year. Like, it's one of those things that had they brought in Brock Osweiler or kept Brock Osweiler and DeShone sits all of last year, then it makes a little more sense to me. But because DeShone was that starter for 15 games, it's so hard for me to you're right, imagine him going back to the bench with really one guy ahead of him and then one guy behind him who's also pretty much ahead of him. Like,
well, what's the difference? Nobody, including DeShone Kizer, is going to make the argument that he earned the chance to start this year. So what's the difference?
I also think I think Hugh has made that quarterback evaluation.
Well, maybe.
I think
But he's now going to sit behind Aaron Rodgers with Brett Hundley.
Maybe even because they already have 2 backups there. DeShone Kizer's career essentially since Notre Dame has been a downward decline. Since he hit that point of where he was considered a potential number 1 overall pick, it's been a steady decline to second round pick to backup now to whatever. I agree. He has potential. I think he could realize it. If you pick a quarterback not first overall, I don't see where that window even is for him. So at that point, it's like, what's the point?
Well, and I'm also not going to die on the hill because they got better value than the Patriots got for trading Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing. That's the other thing is I like Demarius Randall. Like, I like that move. I'm not going to pretend like I've watched a ton of him.
Next time you want to troll the Patriots fans,
I'd be more than happy to.
Let them know that the Browns got better value for DeShone Kizer, loser of 15 games, than the Patriots got for Jimmy Garoppolo, who got a franchise contract with the San Francisco 49ers.
Yeah, it's fair. I mean,
they could have had the Browns' number 4 pick.
That's what they say.
Come on, don't you believe it?
I believe it. But there's a lot with Jimmy Garoppolo and all that situation I think the Browns should have offered the 12th pick last year for him, and who knows if that happened or not. But the other part of this is they get Demarius Randall, who he's going to play free safety, which is important because the Browns didn't have a free safety on the roster. I know everybody still is enjoying that victory lap from cutting Joe Hayden, but this was kind of brought to my attention that when the Browns brought in Jason McCourty, who they just traded to the Patriots, he was announced as a defensive back, and I think the idea was he was going to play free safety where he has experience playing, and Jabril Peppers would play his natural position of strong safety. This is going to allow Jabril Peppers to do that. And so that, as much as adding Demarius Randall, who's a former first-round pick, who's a pretty talented guy, who has experience all over the secondary, not only adding that, but now you finally get to evaluate Jabril Peppers and what he's potentially capable of as a strong safety in the box. That is just as valuable, in my opinion.
I agree with that. With that because nobody needed another year of Jabril Peppers trying to play free safety, and it wasn't fair to him,
right?
And it's certainly made for some really weird defensive configurations, and the even beyond losing every game, the Browns were the butt of a lot of jokes because that guy played 45 yards behind the line of scrimmage, and that's not me going, he played 174 yards behind the line of scrimmage. He played 45 yards.
Legitimately. It was a punt return formation.
Yeah.
So anyway. But yeah, I mean, it's, they would have been better off moving him to offense rather than playing free safety again. I'm a little concerned because, like, the way we talk about free safety and strong safety, we act like they are like he was either like a nose tackle or a cornerback.
That's really funny.
And they're not like that dissimilar of positions, and there were a lot of times where he was just taking poor angles or he was missing tackles, and I think he really needs to improve, but at least now it's one less thing he has to worry about, and it just gives you a full chance to evaluate a guy who is supposed to be an important core piece of this roster.
And somebody that I was excited about when the Browns got him last year, with a lot of potential. So, all right, so the Browns did get good value for DeShone Kizer. They got zip when they traded Danny Shelton.
Yeah, I guess that is...
They practically cut Danny Shelton.
Yeah. And so I think it's one of those things where it's kind of like, I don't see, if this was the NBA, I know like the NBA salary cap, like in and out, and I know the CBA. I think because Danny Shelton was coming up on that 5th-year option.
They were definitely not going to pick it up.
And they were definitely not going to pick it up. It was, even if you can extract a little bit of value out of it and let another team give him a 1-year audition, that makes more sense than just cutting him. I don't know if they saved money. I don't know if they lost money by trading him. I'm guessing you're better off trading than cutting. Well, it was a swap of mid-round picks. So
yeah. This is something that bothers me a little bit, though. First of all, the minute the Browns traded Danny Shelton, he became the worst player in the history of the Cleveland Browns on Twitter. Drives me nuts. I know he didn't live up to his draft value, but that's a dude who had utility. That's a dude that they drafted to play the 3-4, and then they switched to the 4-3. That's very similar to what happened with Jabal Sheard, although Jabal Sheard was a 2nd-round pick, not a 1st-round pick. But
he was a good player.
Danny Shelton had value, and a defensive coordinator who decided that they were going to extract that value could have found ways to do that. And he was never going to be a perfect fit for the defense that Greg Williams wants to run. But these are the kinds of roster casualties that we rail against all the time with the continual turnover of the Browns in their front office. I'm not just going to whitewash it because we think John Dorsey is good and we want everything to be good. So we're not going to... I don't necessarily think this is a smart move. I think this is a poor use of resources, and they didn't actually get anything.
And so I'll make the argument for it, and it's kind of like the DeShone Kizer argument. They like Larry Ogunjobi. They like Caleb Brantley.
Yep.
And so they're better off getting those guys on the field than playing behind two guys who fit the defensive scheme rather than Danny Shelton, who I guess you would. Why does he? It's just tough, and it also, I think. It's kind of like the Corey Coleman situation where he's been a product of a losing locker room, and we saw him dancing down 20 points. And for hard football guy John Dorsey, who knows how that sits with him? Who knows? I guess we don't know enough about what Danny Shelton is like behind the scenes to know what goes into a move like this.
I don't think that's the point. I think the point is that he was miscast in this defense, but he projects really pretty positively as a 3-4 nose tackle.
Right.
And the Cleveland Browns did not sell him based on that. They dumped him. And they didn't get any value for him. And if you're not going to get any value for him, why do it at all?
But how? So I guess what? But now that, I guess my argument would be then they don't. Other teams know the Browns don't run the 3-4. Like they know he has no value to the Browns anymore, and so it's. I think it seemed weird that was all the value they got because he does have that first round pedigree, but also like. Maybe we overrate him because he was the Cleveland Browns' first-round pick, and probably for at least 2 seasons we sold ourselves on this guy could be a cornerstone of the defense.
I don't think I'm overrating him. I think that I recognize that he's kind of a B-.
Right. No.
But yeah, I'm with you. I understand.
But that was our starting point on him.
But my point is, if you're rating all the moves the Browns made, they got basically nothing for Danny Shelton.
Right. Yeah.
So that must be noted.
But so
if he goes on to play really well for New England, then they should have done a better sales job and shopped him to all the teams that play the 3-4. But no, it seems like they were just looking to clean house.
I also think his position just isn't valuable. If he's a 3-4 defensive or nose tackle, that's just not a valuable position in the NFL anymore. It's pretty much a run stuffer. And
Haloti Ngata is still playing.
Yeah, but
Ndamukong Suh is still playing.
But Ndamukong Suh is a 4-3 guy. And
is he a 4-3 guy?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I thought he was a 3-4.
Haloti Ngata
is definitely 3-4.
But he's a 3-4 end. And so those guys
No.
He's not that middle nose tackle.
He played in the middle of the Ravens defense.
I thought he was one of those guys on the I thought
maybe I'm wrong.
I think,
but regardless,
but I don't think Haloti Ngata is as valuable now as he was 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
But now,
not even from an age standpoint. Like that position, we used to see like Vince Wilfork go in the first round. I don't know if Vince Wilfork is still a first round pick if this is 2017.
I hadn't considered that.
And
that's
so
interesting.
That's because that's such a run stuffing position, and the run is less valuable.
I just think there's a risk right now with the Cleveland Browns and John Dorsey, and especially for guys like you and me who are totally against Sashi Brown and going, everything's a great move, everything is perfect, everything works out. The Browns had to change everything over, and John Dorsey,
I agree,
poops gold.
There is a good chance. I mean, not good chance, but maybe good chance that like John Dorsey right now is overpaying for everything, and I just think for a guy. Danny Shelton, for a guy you knew wasn't going to be here long term, who you knew whose option you weren't going to pick up, I just kind of shrug. I mean, I get that, any value is value, but it's just like the guy wasn't going to be on the roster anymore, so they could have cut him, and we would have been like, okay. So maybe that was it. Maybe it was a swap of mid-round picks or cut him. Maybe we don't know what else was on the table. But yeah, I mean, it's that move is not, to me, it's a wash. Like, it's not a win or a loss. It's something that happened. It's also kind of a footnote of last weekend.
Yeah, no, it is. It is. But, I mean, we've got the time.
Yeah. I'm not...
We'll evaluate every one of these suckers.
Yeah. So let's move on then, unless you have any other.
No.
So the free agent signings then.
Let's start with Carlos Hyde.
Yes. To me, it is high upside, low risk, high reward. Like, at worst, he is your replacement for Isaiah Crowell, who was a fair to Midland back. And at best, he realizes his potential from Ohio State. And I know I'm an Ohio State homer, and I covered him in college. So if I had the choice between him or Isaiah Crowell, I'd rather have Carlos Hyde. I think he's had some injuries, which it's easy to treat like a footnote now, but does get annoying.
He's been pretty healthy the last 2 seasons. He had an injury his I almost call it his freshman year, his first year in the league. But I think it's a good pickup. I think we know that he's not going to become Adrian Peterson or Ezekiel Elliott, but I also know that I don't think he's going to fall off the table like Isaiah Crowell did last year.
Yeah.
So I think we have enough of an established track record from Carlos Hyde to know exactly what he is within a 30% margin, and also there are no dreams that he's going to become a 2,000-yard rusher or anything like that. But it's going to be great because it's going to allow the Browns to also go after some kind of a prospect, probably in the second round or third round at running back.
I think, I mean, we know this, right? With Isaiah Crowell even, it's so hard to even evaluate these running backs who are on bad teams because you fall behind, they don't get the carries they need.
Are you going to tell me that Hugh Jackson abandoned the run?
Yeah. And so I just don't I think if you go into this season with your top two backs being Carlos Hyde and Duke Johnson, that is not any different and maybe a slight upgrade from doing it with Isaiah Crowell and Duke Johnson. So
well, and then if you take those things and add Tyrod Taylor, it's such a massive
That's
upgrade.
a great point. So I saw some of those advanced stats that get floated around Twitter, usually defending what Sashi Brown did, but sometimes also admiring other players in the league. And Carlos Hyde is, and I remember this from Ohio State, he is an incredible runner out of the shotgun.
Yes.
Like he takes the ball out of the shotgun, and at Ohio State, it felt like he would fall forward and pick up 8 yards. Like there were times where I felt like he was a better running back than Ezekiel Elliott because he didn't get bottled up. Every time he touched it, it was like this guy's getting 8 yards, and maybe he'll break it off for longer. But and again, I'm not going to pretend like I watched him a bunch in San Francisco, but I know that Buffalo was the number one running team or rushing team in the NFL the last 3 years, and that Tyrod Taylor was a big part of that. And I mean, it's
and obviously Buffalo had pretty good running backs.
Yeah, they've had great running backs in LaShawn McCoy, but just that threat, it's basic math that the defense has to account for the other guy and his legs. Tyrod Taylor is obviously a great runner. I think Carlos Hyde, if they're doing stuff out of the shotgun, that's just a really intriguing fit.
And even more so, I can't wait to see what Duke Johnson can do with Tyrod Taylor.
Or with Todd Haley.
Or with Todd Haley, exactly. I'm very excited. Between Carlos Hyde, I think he solidifies the position. If they get the extension worked out with Duke Johnson and then Jarvis Landry, I think it's just an about face.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that this turns him into a 50-point-a-game juggernaut.
No.
But we're going to see a lot more touchdowns.
Well, a lot of
we saw so few touchdowns last year.
That was the biggest thing to me about.
They were so boring.
They were so boring, and that to me is just like the biggest thing about last week, especially last weekend, as you talked about bolstering that middle class. I mean, really, Tyrod Taylor and Jarvis Landry, those guys bolster your upper class. I mean, those are your upper class roster guys now, and that's, I mean, a lot of it. I don't want to talk myself into Tyrod Taylor being something he's not, because he had very good weapons around him in Buffalo and a very good defense, and who knows. But right now you can put out those names and look, we do this like fans 2 years ago were doing, Josh Gordon and Terrell Pryor and Duke and Crow and Gary Barnidge, and inevitably somebody disappoints and inevitably somebody overperforms. But they've definitely raised the floor and potentially the ceiling as well. So that's.
And they got a tight end who's apparently
Darren Fells,
who is a run blocking machine.
Yeah. And so that's, he's a run blocker. I guess that means Randy Telfer's time in Cleveland has come to an end.
Well, but for me, that's actually a really good signing, not because of Darren Fells, but because it lets the Browns do something different than what David Njoku and
Seth DeValve
do. And that's the idea, is not that it's another position that positively impacts the guys that we're expecting to take a leap. And I think it enables them to take that leap just by, carrying some of the water, And
right.
That's what we're talking about. It's not that every guy that Sashi Brown drafted is garbage. It's that they were set up to fail because there wasn't enough complementary talent on the team. And this is a pure complementary type of a signing.
Yeah, it's definitely, it reminds me of 2009, Eric Mangini's first year here, where I remember they signed Robert Royal, and I got really annoyed because they had just traded Kellen Winslow and The writing was on the wall for Braylon Edwards, and they were cutting all this talent, and then they signed Robert Royal, and that was like the big free agent signing. I'm glad Darren Fells is like at the bottom of this list.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean that's some people have started debating like what it means for Seth DeValve because he's one of those precious.
I think it's an investment in Seth DeValve and Njoku.
Yeah.
Well, certainly Njoku
Yeah.
and maybe Seth DeValve.
And Njoku they really liked Njoku. They thought he was one of the bright spots.
I bet they like DeValve as well.
Yeah.
I bet they don't care about Telfair.
No, but
Telford.
he played the most last year because I think they are concerned that DeValve can't block and that he's not as good enough as a receiver as Njoku to be worth having
Maybe.
on the field. But whatever, we get into these stupid like fights on Twitter about Seth DeValve, and
If Seth DeValve is your problem,
at the end of the day, it's Seth DeValve,
yeah, exactly.
and so it's funny. They also bolstered the offensive line, but let's save that for the end because that will be a good transition
Okay.
to Joe Thomas.
I don't remember any of their names either.
I actually do, although I keep calling Chris Hubbard Max Unger, who I think I think he's an NFL player, but
Max Unger was a center.
okay.
Is a center.
For the Steelers?
Yeah, I thought so.
Okay. So I'm just confusing my Steelers offensive lineman.
I just remember talking about him as a draft prospect.
Okay.
So I don't really remember his. I don't know. Anyway,
It's funny though because so they signed Carlos Hyde like outright as a free agent. And I was like, didn't Carlos Hyde just get drafted? And he did just get drafted in 2014.
yeah.
But the idea of a 2014 pick lasting until still playing in the league in
Yes.
2018 is so foreign to Cleveland.
Yep.
Because I mean, there's Joel Bitonio and there's Christian Kirksey, but fact
I love our talks, by the way, because I think we know kind of as much, but we're not going to pretend. We're not going to read from a list and pretend that like all of a sudden we know these three offensive
Right.
linemen and we know this tight end
Yeah.
like frontwards and backwards. Like we've taken all of the pretending off the table, which I really like.
Did you see some of my? I was tweeting yesterday about. Actually, this gets us into the cornerbacks. So they signed T.J. Carey from the Raiders, former OU Bobcat.
Yep.
A starter. He's actually like started for a good portion of his career. Started 15 games for the Raiders last year. It seems like he's going to be a starting cornerback on this team. And then they signed Terrence Mitchell, a guy who actually he started like 13 games last year for the Chiefs, but it was really his first significant starting experience. I didn't know anything about either of these guys,
No.
but obviously at my job at WKYC, I write a lot of stories, and in our stories we have to put pictures. And so I look up the pictures like in Getty Images or USA Today Sports Images, and like there's all these pictures of Terrence Mitchell running back interceptions, like for touchdowns. So I was like, oh, this guy must be awesome.
It's like the most anecdotal evidence in the world.
And so I tweeted that out. I was like, just went through a bunch of Terrence Mitchell pictures. He looks great. And then tweeted one of him like high stepping into the end zone. I was like, could a bad player do this?
You should create your own website like Pro Football Focus. It's
Yeah.
just like anecdotal video evidence, AVE.
Yeah, I have. Oh, that would not go over well.
He's got an ape score.
Yeah.
Anecdotal picture evidence.
Yeah, and so Terrence Mitchell had 4 interceptions last year. And I know like interceptions are a terrible way to judge cornerbacks. Both of them had
They usually reflect better on the pass rush.
Right. Both of them had a bunch of passes defended. But yeah, I mean, I think TJ Carey is probably a starter, and Terrence Mitchell is a guy who's going to play somewhere, and he'll be on the field. And rather than it being a guy named Michael Jordan trying to guard AJ Green if there's injuries, maybe it's Terrence Mitchell. So both of them, and especially with trading Jason McCourty, I think cornerback is probably pretty. I think they could cut Jamar Taylor. Like I think they could just go into this thing super young and athletic. And so, but I think TJ Carey kind of alleviates some of the pressure off of that.
Jamar Taylor's only, 30?
Yeah, but he's been a guy who, he might even be younger than that. I thought he was
like 28 or 29, and so he might be 30 this season.
Younger than that.
But anyway.
He's like a 2013 second round pick who just he was a bust in Miami.
It's not bad to have a little bit of depth, though. And,
Yeah.
And that was a theme.
But you also have Breanne Body Calhoun.
Right, but that's something we talked about last year is like, hey, normal NFL teams carry X number of DBs, and the Browns were carrying X minus 5.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those positions that if you can find depth and you can have those guys play special teams, they're going to be your best special teams players as well.
Yeah.
And so the Browns could use just some depth.
Yeah. And also just based on the contracts these two guys got, like TJ Carey got pretty much the going rate for a number 2 corner, and Terrence Mitchell got a backup contract. So yeah, I mean it just looks more like an NFL roster now than it did yesterday. So that's a plus. And the offensive line, though, I'll tell you what, when judging players off of pictures, offensive line, it's really hard to do.
Yeah.
A lot of them are, maybe they just happen to be standing there as the quarterback's throwing it. Maybe they're celebrating in the end zone after a touchdown. Sometimes it's more of a picture of the pass rusher. And
we used to try to get pictures of players during training camp so that we could kind of load our database so that we'd have pictures all year long and waiting for next year. And the hardest ones to get are the linemen.
Yeah.
And you'd end up with a lot of like casual helmet off, like knee on the ground, like back of the head, but we could see their nameplate. Like offensive linemen are really tough to get.
Yeah, but when you get a good offensive line picture, sometimes it's a really good one, especially the touchdown celebrations.
It's easy to get receivers, easy to get defensive backs, because defensive backs, you can get them like going backwards, and you can actually see their eyes unless they've got the.
Quarterbacks are the easiest ones, though, I think, because you can get them passing, you can get them throwing. You never know what the play resulted in, so every drop back looks pristine. So I've never seen a bad quarterback picture. I guess unless it's like the butt fumble, or any of the Browns.
Or my favorite quarterback picture, the RG3 and Josh McCown standing side by side in arm slings.
Oh God,
it's the greatest quarterback picture of all time.
That's great. So Donald Stevenson is a offensive tackle they signed from the Denver Broncos. He is a pure backup. Like he's getting paid like $2.5 million.
Fair enough.
Yeah, that poor guy.
Thrust into service.
So
although the Browns knew Joe Thomas was retiring when they made that deal.
Yes. And so it makes sense but it's also, even with Joe Thomas retiring, like they have Spencer Drango, they have Sean Coleman, they have Chris Hubbard, they're just filling out their roster. But Donald Stevenson is a guy who, if he's in the game, probably not good for whatever's going on, but he's a body.
Unless it's field goal team.
Yeah. He will be on the field goal team. I feel pretty confident in saying Donald Stevenson might even be the left tackle on the field goal team, at least one of the left tackles. So,
yes.
And then the other one, Chris Hubbard, this one was a little more interesting. People seem to like him.
Okay.
He has very little starting experience. He was an undrafted free agent, kind of bounced around. Practice squad, the Steelers practice squad. I think he was in Carolina for a cup of coffee on their practice squad, but has spent his whole career essentially with Pittsburgh. Started 14 games in the last few years, but primarily at right tackle. Has some experience at left tackle. He said today when he met with the media, he expects to play right tackle, which pretty much means, John Dorsey then confirmed this, that they're going to move Sean Coleman to left tackle, at least to start.
We had talked behind the scenes at WFNY about the possibility of Bitonio moving out there.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound like that's going to be in the plans.
No, it was interesting. So they signed Chris Hubbard, and they signed him to like a starter deal. Like this was actually like, if you want to complain about any money they spent, this is the deal that kind of raises some eyebrows because it's a lot of money for a guy with not a lot of starting experience.
Do you remember how much it was? I don't mean to put you on the spot.
It was 5 years, $37.5 million.
Okay.
And so a little over.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, for
that was the one that Jeff Schwartz was referencing as, hey, this makes Mitch look like a really good deal.
Yeah, and so. That's, it's starter money. And so that was what was funny was they signed Chris Hubbard. I think everybody thought he was a pure right tackle. It turns out he probably is a pure right tackle. It was before we knew about Joe Thomas. It was a day before we knew about Joe Thomas. And so we were saying this move either means they really, really like Sean Coleman and think he could be the left tackle replacement, or they really don't like Sean Coleman and they're already trying to replace him. But it sounds like Joe Thomas has said he likes Sean Coleman, that he thinks he's going to be the starting left tackle.
I read on Twitter on our way to this podcast that Joe Thomas was in the field house working with Sean Coleman today.
So
today.
Yeah. So So yeah, Sean Coleman's going to be the starting left. I mean, they have their starting offensive line now filled out, so they have
And
some
sometimes
depth.
it's better to just know and let those guys get going and try. There is no replacing Joe Thomas.
No.
And so it's better sometimes to not even think about trying. And honestly, as great and unbelievable as Joe Thomas is, they didn't suffer as badly without him as I thought they were going to.
No. Well, they still have Spencer Drango on the roster, and
Yes.
so I don't think Spencer Drango is.
And that's not a knock on Joe Thomas.
No, it's not. It's just it's.
Maybe it's a feather in the cap of Sean Coleman and
Yeah.
Spencer Drango.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? But yeah, that's It's funny because Carmen and Lima were having this vigorous debate this week about, well, if you think you're going to lose Joe Thomas, does that mean you trade back from 4 and select your offensive tackle of the future? And Lima, Carmen did some revisionist history because he caught a lot of backlash on it. Ken Carmen claims that he wasn't advocating for it. And while he wasn't firmly advocating for it, like saying this is what they should do, he was definitely in the camp of he wouldn't mind if they did it. Whereas Lima was feverishly saying, why wouldn't you trade up for that guy rather than trade back down? To which Ken retorted, well, you're not going to trade up for a guy if you don't think he's going to replace Joe Thomas. To my rebuttal then when I started tweeting at them because I was all fired up was, well, then why even go get the guy in the first place? So, yeah, I mean, it's not a great offensive tackle draft, and
I'm not trading down for anything.
I'm not trading down. No, again,
Take those picks.
they have so many picks. That's the other thing about Tyrod Taylor, to bring this full circle before we break the circle and talk about Joe Thomas, is this roster is so freaking young because they've had so many picks in the last few years and just because of where it's at. And if the idea is that guys who you pick in the first, especially the first and second, and then third round to a degree, are supposed to come in and be immediate starters, like they can't add 6 rookie starters to this team. They can't. They have 5 picks in the first 34 picks or whatever. They can't afford to do that.
If they want to trade up or swap out some of those second round picks for future picks, I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
I want them to grab 1 and 4.
Yep.
If they grab 1 and 4 and trade every other pick this draft and don't select another player, it'd be a little bit weird, but I'd be okay with it.
They cannot screw up picking their quarterback at number 1 and picking the best player available at 4. They cannot screw that up.
No.
I mean, maybe the player doesn't work out, maybe, but nobody's going to look back and revise that, oh, how did they take Minka Fitzpatrick there? Or how did they take Saquon Barkley or Bradley Chubb there?
No, it's like nobody yells at the Browns for drafting Courtney Brown.
No, right.
It didn't work, but nobody yells
Tim
at them
Couch.
for it. Yeah, no.
There's not.
There are mitigating factors, whatever. Those were good picks.
Yeah. Well, even I'll tell you,
Sometimes good picks don't work out.
yeah, even
Sam Bradford was a good pick. Do you think the Rams are forever going, the greatest pick we ever had was Sam Bradford? No.
right. It's like we do this revisionist history. We even, we do it with Barkevious Mingo, where
Yeah.
Barkevious Mingo was getting mocked to the Browns. Like he was getting mock drafted to the Browns. That was a really bad draft. That's actually a funny one because you look at it and it's like, okay, well, who should they have taken? Like Barkevious Mingo's still in the league, and I'm
Just signed a new deal with the Seahawks.
yeah, I'm far from a Barkevious Mingo defender or fan, but
Sure.
that's not in the pantheon of bad moves.
It's a good way to troll Joe Banner, though.
Yeah, it is, and that's yeah. There are a lot of good ways.
All right,
to
should we do
troll
Joe Thomas, then get out of
Yeah,
here?
let's get to Joe Thomas.
Let me start with a memory.
Yes.
The first, I think it was the first year we were covering training camp for waiting for next year. I was there. I pulled the right straw.
Wait, first of all, is there a way to talk about Joe Thomas's retirement without talking like he died?
No.
Okay, because I agree, and I'm fine with that.
Yeah, no, it's
I posted an Instagram of me interviewing him, and I think people thought he died.
Yeah, and we should put everything that we talk about Joe Thomas to that Sarah McLachlan music.
Yeah, I will remember.
Yeah,
you.
exactly. So I was lucky enough to be there the day that they extended him the first time, and it was like the biggest deal ever, and just being there when he kind of walked out with a gigantic smile on his face and talked about taking the money and wanting to be there, and even that story there, I believe there were some comments where people were like, well, he's just taking the money, he doesn't believe what he's saying about the team, and it's like Joe Thomas took a lot of flack for being the consummate team guy over the years, and even I probably digged in a little bit when he supported certain coaches, Joe Thomas he's a good team guy, so he supports every coach, he thinks every hire
and quarterback, every quarterback. Just like Joe Hayden used to work out with every rookie.
So before Joe Thomas died, that was my greatest memory of Joe Thomas.
What can you say? Like, the guy is probably the best left tackle of all time, if not one of them. It is a shame that he never played on a team better than his rookie team, and all the crap he had to go through, and all the coaches and quarterbacks and all that. The fact that he's managed to become the personality and beloved figure that he is, that's, like, to me, as much as it sucks, it's cool. I have two memories. One was my first training camp this past year. It was raining or something. Yeah, I think it started to rain outside, and they had to run inside to practice inside in the indoor facility, and Joe Thomas is just screaming, "Everybody, run for your life! Take cover!" And I tweeted it out, and he retweeted it and made some funny comment about it. But it was just kind of fun. Like, it's kind of like you had to be there, but like it fit in so perfectly with him. Or save yourselves. That was it. Save yourselves.
And who knew before, like 3 years ago, that Joe was so funny? He just came out of his shell probably 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And started to show the personality that he actually was. And I don't know if you listened, but when he explained why he was retiring on the Tomahawk podcast, it was like just an unassailable fact that he couldn't do it anymore.
Right.
And the talk that he had about his back and the knee and
all the drugs in his body.
And what Mondays were like. And it's unbelievable that he was able to play each offensive snap for as long as he did.
That's the other thing that.
But I think we sometimes forget, these guys, we think of them, I say this all the time, we think of pro athletes as buckets of stats.
Yeah.
And it's just impossible when he's on that podcast to not just think about like what it must be like to not be able to practice anymore and only be able to save yourself for Sundays and then barely be able to make it through that.
Right. Well, I can't, you said buckets of stats. To me, I treat them, admittedly, and a lot of people do this, as Madden figures, as characters in Madden. And so
they're avatars.
Yeah, and so to me, it's like, I'm not going to lie, even there was a part of me where it's like, 11 years isn't that long of an NFL career. Like, for a guy who, he could play 15 years. But then you think about that.
LeBron started when he was 18.
Like, he was only drafted in 2007. I was a senior in high school in 2007. And then I realized how old I'm getting and how much longer, not even comparably, it takes me to get out of bed and to recover from drinking. and that streak, maybe it was very unwise. Like, maybe they should have been shutting him down at the end of every 4-12 season that they played. But it's his legacy. And then the other memory I have is I was at that game. I know I've told this story before, when he got injured this year. And there were not a lot of highlights in the 2017 Brown season, dare I say. This was the only one that you could. I actually brought this up to him and we had a laugh about it because I was like, I don't want to call your injury a highlight, but the standing ovation he got when he ran off the field was like chills inducing. And it was a half empty stadium, unfortunately, but you wouldn't have known it if you were in that stadium at that moment. It was one of those things where you watch football and a guy's down after the play and you see it's a lineman and you start to look at the other numbers that are still standing. And there's Joel Bitonio, there's Sean Coleman, there's J.C. Treader, there, and it's like, oh, that's Joe Thomas. And it's like, well, he's going to get up, and then he doesn't get up. And then there's a timeout, and then he runs off the side of the field, and it's like, oh, we're witnessing what we thought was the end of the streak. Little did we know it was the end of his career. But he jogs off the field. Taylor Lewan, the left tackle for the Titans, another Big Ten guy from Michigan, ran onto the field to slap him on the helmet. And but it was like chills inducing that ovation that he got. And it's going to be cool when they put him in the Ring of Honor this year, what that moment's like.
Well, and I shouldn't use Joe Thomas retiring as an excuse to besmirch other things, but like
I think it's a fair conversation.
I was firmly against the Jim Thome statue. Like, and that's a surefire Hall of Famer and everything else.
Be careful. Last time we had the Jim Thome conversation, we got feedback on Twitter.
Yeah, that's funny, right? I will fight to the death. Figuratively, not literally, over Joe Thomas.
Yeah.
He is a guy who deserves the statue. He's a surefire Hall of Famer. He played every snap of his entire career with the Cleveland Browns. He is a Cleveland Brown, and I don't care how many games they lost in his tenure. He is the statue guy, up with Jim Brown, with anybody else who you would consider giving a statue to for the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, and he is, he's first ballot, right?
And I'd be, for sure first ballot, and I would be proud to have my kids take a picture with that statue.
Yeah, and to wear that jersey. Yes. That is a...
And yes, that's another thing.
Only jersey worth buying.
Finally, the Browns have a jersey worth buying, but they have to produce the throwback version, because I'm not buying the new version of the Joe Thomas jersey. I'm not.
Yeah.
I will not. I would not for my kids. I would not for me.
They, I bet on eBay you could still find them, but you're right.
I've already looked. You can order them from China.
Well, I could have told you that. If you want one for $15, you just have to wait a month.
They don't have logos.
No, they do. They're just backwards.
Yes.
So
they look perfect in your Instagram selfie.
I could do a whole podcast on fake jerseys from China.
That should be the name of the podcast.
Fake jerseys from China. I'll tell you where the Cleveland Browns Stadium is bad, or First Energy Stadium is bad. Quicken Loans Arena is pretty bad. They're so prevalent. First Energy or Progressive Park, I think, has more fake jerseys inside of it than real ones.
Oh,
I can tell, and it's based on the font and the material and stuff, and I own a couple, but
I looked at some of them, especially with Joe Thomas retiring, and the numbers are weird sizes. There's all kinds of weird things going on.
Yeah, you
can spot a fake.
I've had one where I ordered it. It was actually I think it was one of the first ones I ordered. It was a Francisco Lindor, and it was an adult jersey, but it came with the name on the back was in the youth-sized font. So I was like, great. They don't offer returns, apparently, refunds, but it's crazy that Joe Thomas isn't on the. It was one of those things. Even though it's funny, everything in retrospect, looking back at the last 6 months, whenever the injury, 6 months since the injury, everything pointed to this, and yet you couldn't fathom it until it actually happened.
No, you couldn't, and so now in hindsight, all that weight loss meant he was retiring. All the everything meant he was retiring.
Yes.
What about? And I don't want to dwell on it, but the people who were mad at Joe Thomas for holding up the Browns.
Well, it turns out he wasn't.
No.
Well, I will say I fought back against the people who were saying, well, he must have told them by now, because that building cannot keep a secret to save its life. And so I will end on this.
Do you think it still can't keep a secret?
I will end on this. The fact that Joe Thomas apparently told them a week ago and it didn't get out for a full week tells me that there are improvements in that building in Berea that I can start to believe in.
Oh, it's a new day.
That is going to do it for today's 3 Sports Podcast. He's Craig Lyndall of Waiting for Next Year. I'm Ben Axelrod from WKYC. If you enjoyed the show, subscribe on iTunes, leave a rating, leave a review, tell a friend. We'll be back with you next week breaking down all the latest in Cleveland sports.